This talk was given by Roshi Rafe Martin, guiding teacher of the Endless Path Zendo, a lay Buddhist community in Rochester, New York. Join our practice, in person or online, at endlesspathzendo.org.
So today is Saturday, January 27th, 2024. Today we're going to take up a koan, one that we typically look at in the winter. We've had snowfall here. Of course, now it's pretty much melted, and it's more like rain with some snow remaining. Still, why not? Blue Cliff Record 42, Layman Pong's beautiful Snowflakes. So the case goes like this. When Layman Pong took leave of Yaoshan, that would be Yaksan in Japanese, the latter asked 10 Zen students to escort him or accompany him to the temple gate to bid him farewell. The layman, pointing to the falling snowflake, said, "Beautiful snowflakes, they fall nowhere." Then one of the Zen students named Zenkaku, literally means a practicer of Zen, asked, "Then where do they fall?" The layman slapped him. Zenkaku said, "Even a layman shouldn't be so crude." The layman said, "Though you call yourself a Zen student, old Yama, that is the Lord of the dead, the king of the underworld, won't let go of you." Zenkaku said, "What about you?" Again, the layman slapped him and said, "You look, but you are blind. You speak, but you are mute." Shuedo, would be Secho in Japanese, who was the original former of the Blue Cliff, what became the Blue Cliff Record, comments, "When Pong first spoke, I would have made a snowball and hit him with it." So there are two books in English about the Layman Pong. One is the recorded sayings of Layman Pong, and this was done in the late 60s, and it introduces the original text compiled by Pong's friend, the prefect UT, not long after Pong's death. This book was the result of a team effort put together by Ruth Fuller Sasaki, Yoshitaka Iria, and Dana Fraser. Gary Snyder, as a young man practicing Zen in Japan at the time, was also involved. And there's a more recent translation by James Green called The Sayings of Layman Pong, which is also very good. And it's more contemporary, but I still prefer the older book's versions of the poems. Maybe it's simply because that's the one I read and knew first. Sometimes it's like that. We kind of imprint on things and everything else is secondary. In any case, Weishan, or Yaksan, or Yaoshan rather, is the teacher who appears in this koan case. His dates are 745 to 828, was an important teacher who knew Layman Pong well. Pong was rather unusual. He was a deeply awakened layman. His wife also was realized, as were his daughter and his son. Especially his daughter, Lingjiao, was noted for her insight, and she appears actually as one of the women in our ancestral line, as does Pong, a layman. This is kind of unusual, but Dana and Henry Roshi felt it was important to start including lay people who are ancestors as well as women. And Pong, after his awakening, turned his home into a temple. And then eventually he gave that his home as a temple to the public. And he set out on a peripatetic life, checking his insight against the realizations of noted contemporary teachers. He had a great deal of confidence. He and his family then supported themselves by making bamboo baskets and utensils, and also by farming. He was legendary in China at the time for an act which captured the imagination of his times. And that is, he'd dumped his wealth in a river, cutting off any last temptations to settle into an easy life. However, Aitken Roshi, who was a pretty mild temperament himself, felt that Pong was limited by his own sense of confidence and strength, formidable strength of character. He was a kind of all or nothing kind of guy, totally in or totally out, and he had very little mediation between the two extremes. So he was powerful, but sometimes that kind of strength can be its own limitation. Anyway, Pong's initial realization was with Shirdo, who, when asked by Pong, who is it that does not accompany the 10,000 things, 10,000 things, cars, trees, sky, clouds, people, animals, dogs, blades of grass, broken glass, cell phones, etc., everything. Who is it that does not accompany the 10,000 things? When Shirdo was asked that by Pong, he just simply reached out and covered Pong's mouth with his hand. And Pong had deep realization. He then went to Matsu, a truly great teacher also of the time, with over 80 deeply enlightened disciples. Now, Matsu and Shirdo were considered the two really great teachers of their time. Matsu upholding Linji tradition, and Shirdo what eventually became later on Soto, especially in Japan. But they're two Chinese teachers of same period. And it was said north of the river or south of the lake is to be a really complete monk, mature. You had to have gone north of the river, south of the lake. That is, had doksan and be checked by both these teachers. Yet both of them derived their lineage from the sixth patriarch, Wei Nong, only about a generation back. I am moved by this personally in terms of, in my own experience, I worked with both Kapleau Roshi and then later Aitken Roshi, who for me, I saw as the two great teachers of our time. And I feel very fortunate that my work in Zen could be checked and refined by both of them. So when Pong asked Matsu, who is it that does not accompany the 10,000 things, Matsu answered, I'll tell you when you've swallowed all the water of the West River in one gulp. Pong responded, I already swallowed all the water of the West River. To which Matsu said, then I've already told you. With that, Pong had great awakening. After that, he insisted on continuing to refine his practice realization further, and so came to Yao Shan, which is the koan. Not enough yet, not yet enough, is how Aitken Roshi expressed this kind of divine discontent, which is Dogen's point in the Genjo koan section of the Shobogenzo, which we read last week. He said, when you still have not fully realized the Dharma in body and mind, you think it's sufficient. When the Dharma fills body and mind, you feel some lack. In short, when practice realization is complete, you feel there's something yet lacking. When you feel it's complete and are satisfied and feel no lack, it's not yet complete. So here's Wan Yu Engo's, in Japanese, commentary on the case in the Blue Cliff Record, which would be Pien Lu in Chinese, Hekigen Roku in Japanese. Wan Wu, or Engo, created the Blue Cliff Record as we know it, based on the initial compilation and verses put together by Shuido. So here's what Wan Wu said. Since Pong was an adept, all the various monasteries later welcomed him, and wherever he went, they vied to praise him. After he had gotten to Yao Shan and stayed around there a while, he went to take leave. Shan held him in the highest esteem, so he ordered 10 Chan travelers, Zen students, practitioners, monks, to see him off. It happened to be snowing at the time. Remember, this commentary was written 1,000 years ago or so. The layman pointed to the snow and said, "Good snowflakes. They don't fall in any other place." The Cleary brothers, whose translation of the Hekiganroku, or Blue Cliff Record, is the standard one these days. And it's a terrific book, worth reading, because of all the poetry and comments in it from both Shwedo and Wanwu. And it's got a good introduction as well. Anyway, they translate what in our text is beautiful snowflakes, which comes through Kapla Roshi, Aiken Roshi, Yamada Roshi, Danon Henry Roshi. Beautiful snowflakes as good snowflakes, which works quite well as well. Anyway, when Chan traveler Chuan asked, and the Clearys translate the actual name of the monk listed as Zenkaku in our text as Chuan. So he asked, where did they fall then? Where did the snowflakes fall? The layman immediately slapped him. Since Chan was unable to carry out the order, the layman ordered him to carry out half. Although the order was put into effect, when Chan traveler Chuan responded in this way, it was not that he didn't know what Pong was getting at. They each had a point, but their rolling up and rolling out were not the same. Even so, in some respects, he didn't come up to the layman. That is why he fell into his trap and found it difficult to get out of the layman's range. After the layman had hit him, the layman went on to explain the reason to him, saying, "Your eyes see like a blind man. Your mouth speaks like a mute." Besides these words, Shwedo, the original compiler, said, when he first spoke, I would have just made a snowball and hit him with it. By the way, I wanted to begin with a couple of poems about snow, so let me throw them in right here, speaking of snowballs. Hashin wrote this haiku: "There is neither heaven nor earth, only snow, falling incessantly." And Basho wrote, one of my favorites, "You light a fire, I'll show you something nice. A great big ball of snow. You light a fire, I'll show you something nice. A great big ball of snow." And Ryokan, "The 3,000 worlds that step forward with the light snow, and the light snow that falls in those 3,000 worlds. The 3,000 worlds that step forward with the light snow, and the light snow that falls in those 3,000 worlds." We also have an introductory koan, which is good. 1,000 peaks covered in snow, 1,000 mountains covered in snow. Why is that one peak not white? 1,000 mountains covered in snow. Why is that one peak not white? It's an important little koan. In any case, the Hekiganroku, or Blue Cliff Record collection of 100 koans, this case is number 42, was compiled in China in the Song dynasty in 1125, originally by Shwedo, whose dates are 980 to 1052, and then expanded with commentaries and verses to his final form by Wanwu in 1063 to 1135, his date. So he was about 60 years later, is when he came along after Shwedo. It's a text admired both by Rinzai and Soto teachers, including Dogen. In fact, it's said that Dogen was so impressed when he saw it, and he saw it on the day before he was leaving China to return to Japan. He stayed up all that night copying the entire work, creating what was to become known in Japanese Soto circles as the one-night Hekigan. Zen is not just for monks closeted away from the world. It is life. Snow falling, rain dripping, bills on the counter, children to be fed, shoelaces tied, deadlines met, doctors visited, weddings and funerals attended. Still, Zen tradition has clear monastic roots. While now primarily a lay movement in the West, there were only a handful of well-known early lay exemplars. Even now, just a few come easily to mind. Vimalakirti at the time of the Buddha, Fu Taiji, and Layman Pong and his family, as I said, especially his daughter, Lingzhao. There's also the old woman who sold tea and mind refreshers, or tea cakes, to Deshan, and skillfully opened his eyes to the gulf between what might even be a subtle conceptual understanding and actual realization. But as historic research continues, many more ardent and realized lay practitioners, including women, young and old, including women and those who are young and old, will continue coming to light. Vimalakirti, our mythic exemplar from ancient India in the Buddha's own time, is really the first that's important and really upheld in Zen tradition. And interestingly, this sutra, the Vimalakirti Sutra, is one of the only Buddhist sutras to focus not on the Buddha himself, and it's traditionally been one of the most popular sutras in Zen tradition. It's humorous, very humorous. It's iconoclastic, very iconoclastic. It's outrageously imaginative and simultaneously deeply profound. It upholds the archetype of formidable lay practice and at the same time pokes fun at the limitations of monastic stuffiness. Its sacredness and humor in equal measures reminds me of the kind of healthy and inspiring balance of art, creativity, humor, and profound sacredness, which Rose and I saw and experienced while being able to attend ceremonies at Zuni Pueblo, which is a place that I was invited into for about a dozen years. There I saw that life and the sacred can come together without any self-conscious piety. And I think Zen has a very good handle on this truly ancient way of human beingness. We see it in things like the Vimalakirti Sutra. We see it in so many of the koans and mondo. Now, the other major sutra that focuses entirely on a layman, not the Buddha, is the Sixth Patriarch Sutra, which presents the life and teaching of Huineng, the sixth patriarch of Zen in China, counting forward from Bodhidharma. Interestingly, Huineng did not receive monastic ordination, which includes having his head shaved, until some 20 years after his own great enlightenment, when he finally came out of hiding in anonymity and began formal teaching and took up the iron holeless kang of the teacher. Kang was kind of something that a prisoner might be locked into, made out of wood, stalks like. Zen teachers are said to wear an iron kang with no hole in it for your head to fit. A difficult task. Now, here's the koan again. Pong is leaving the monastery, and the abbot, Yaoshan, sends 10 monks off with the noted layman, a sign of respect. He probably picked these 10 monks for his own particular reasons, that is, Yaoshan did. And among the 10 were likely rank beginners, some with slight insight, and a couple of seasoned hands, perhaps even 1 or 2 with truly deep insight. And there would be a range of personalities, maybe a few didn't even want to be there, out in the cold, trudging through the snow. I don't know what kind of winter clothing or gear monks had back then in China, but it certainly wasn't LL Bean or North Face quality. Odds were they were cold. Then again, where was the layman going, and how far was he going in this falling snow all on his own? Monasteries were on mountains, usually quite isolated from urban centers. Maybe everyone was just tougher then, with stronger immune systems, 1,000 years ago, the comforts we take for granted, things as simple as a flush toilet, did not exist, or central heating for that matter. And given all this, there is a Dharma twist beneath the smooth surface. I wonder what the layman will make of this situation, Yao Shan probably thought. In short, it was respectful, but there was also a Dharma setup. The layman was not one to keep his light hidden under a bushel, confined to the zendo and doksan room. The world was his oyster. Vimalakirti, who has no historical referent despite looming large in Zen Buddhist imagination, was said to rival the Buddha in understanding. Yet he was married and engaged fully in both business and the various social issues of his time. The sutra tells us that all his activities were undertaken, nonetheless, in the spirit of benefiting others and revealing the universal truths of selfless wisdom and compassion. Pong was an actual person, not a mythic personality. He was also married with a family, and he lived in the Tang era of China, the so-called golden age of Zen. While he initially had some wealth, he eventually rid himself of it, seeing it as an encumbrance. Together, Vimalakirti and Pong map out the two poles of lay practice. One had great wealth and a fully engaged life in the world. The other chose simplicity and homelessness in order to dedicate himself fully to practice realization on his own independent terms. The two of them show there is no one right way to practice realization as life or to live practice realization. We work with our personalities and karma, coming creatively forward as we are. The koan story takes place in winter. Snow is falling, but there's no mention of the cold or discomfort, just beauty and mystery. Pong sees opportunity and beautiful snowflakes, he says. They fall nowhere. And so he sets out a barb or hook to challenge the monks accompanying him to the temple gate. Of course, if the monks are not up for a challenge, they could just make it into a mundane statement and ignore the challenge in his words. Yup, they're beautiful snowflakes, all right, and on they trudge. But the hook remains. If nowhere, then where do those snowflakes fall? What's Pong getting at? Will someone step up and respond? Or at least, if puzzled and not purposefully ignoring the point, mightn't someone simply honestly ask, what do you mean nowhere? I mean, wouldn't you, if you'd been there? And while Pong is indeed a type A personality, primed and ready to devour anyone not up to his standards, we also get a glimpse here of something intimate and tender beneath his formidable Dharma exterior. He doesn't just say, these snowflakes fall nowhere. He says, beautiful snowflakes. They fall nowhere. This glimpse into his inner world offers a quiet, timeless pause as they all make their way through the falling snow to the monastery gate some quarter or half mile away. Pong lives in a realized world of beauty and purity. And in this timeless instant, he gathers us all in, the white snowflakes whirling down, landing, vanishing seamlessly into the great blanket of snow, already covering everything. The monks walking on beside and around him, and us now personally encountering the case. Perhaps one day we'll do so alone in the Doksan room, are encountering the case intimately. Pong is offering a pointer to our own true world. The Cleary brothers' translation of Good Snowflakes serves us well here too. Pong does not live in a world without adjectives. It's not just snowflakes. People can sometimes unconsciously fear that with some awakening, they will have to give up their personal inner life and individuality and become rather empty and bland. Joseph Campbell seems to present this very misunderstanding in his volume on Oriental mythology. I have enjoyed Campbell's work, but I think he misses the boat when he talks about Zen Buddhism in that volume. He doesn't get it. For the opposite is closer to the truth. Realizing unself-centered emptiness opens a path for the full maturing of character, not its blandly universal fading away. Pong's words and deeds show us not to worry. His response to the weather is personal and intimate. The snowflakes are beautiful and good, moistening the earth, creating beauty, allowing underlying patterns of earth and sky, road and gate to stand out, everything merging into a field of whiteness, a kind of oneness. His degree of awareness should not be surprising. When we look at Zen's history, what we tend to find among our awakened ancestors are qualities like independence, individuality, and dynamic creativity, not to mention awareness, wisdom, and compassion. In our own time, it is the lack of these very qualities that is causing such a range of problems, from climate change to wars and political polarizations of all stripes. We are culturally lost in blinding snowstorms of our own making. The monk's name Zenkaku really means simply Zen practitioner. Of the 10 monks accompanying the layman to the temple gate, he alone steps up and takes the bait, sticking his neck out to respond to the layman's challenge. Maybe the others did simply take Pong's words at their easiest face value. Yes, beautiful snowflakes. And trudging on muttered, right, beautiful, and it's cold, yeah. Ooh, it's cold, that's true. Or maybe they kept their heads down to play it safe. Oh, he's dangled a hook, I can see that, but I'm not going to get caught. Only Zenkaku responds with a counter-challenge of his own. There's something to be said for that. All right, where do they fall? He alone speaks, and depending on how we take his response, he either reveals an abysmally one-sided ignorance, fools rush in, as they say, or conversely, offers Pong a really good counter-challenge. Which is it? Aiken Roshi said that Yasutani Roshi held that Zen students shouldn't hesitate to ask. In other words, questions are important. They clarify our personal path. We should ask them of our teachers, of our tradition, and of ourselves. Why was I born? Why am I here? Why must I die? Why, if as the Buddha announced at the moment of his great enlightenment, all beings are Buddhas, already fully endowed with wisdom and virtue, why, if that's true, is our world such a mess? What can I do to help myself and help our messed up world? Such questions can do more for us than any elaborate answers. Teachers who think that questions are attacks on their authority should question themselves. So Zenkaku asks, what do you mean nowhere? The ground is covered with snow. Can't you see? Where would they fall? Is he clueless? A beginner who can't see where Pong is coming from or what he's getting at? Or is he sharp? Sees Pong's point recognizes his Dharma perspective there, and steps forward from equal depths to probe the layman's position. Is he saying, duh? Or is he saying, nowhere? Really? I'd call you on that. Isn't it one-sided? What about the ground? Can't you present an insightful yet totally ordinary response, complete yet without any airs? Come down from the top of the mountain, old Layman, and get real. Pong responds immediately. Without hesitation, he slaps Zenkaku. Whoa! Ferocious, outrageous. But is it a rebuke? Is he saying, how stupid? Wake up, look directly and see. Or is he actually answering Zenkaku's challenge? Unfettered activity can be liberating. It can also be misleading. Wild Fox Zen. As a performative and Zen-y style, it is given real Zen and the awakened spontaneity that emerges from truly selfless, compassionate insight, a deservedly bad name. Unguided spontaneity without understanding is Fox Zen, imitative and incomplete. Pang, or Pong, seems to have been a forge ahead, damn the torpedoes, type A kind of guy. When he saw through his own personal attachment to wealth, he didn't carefully divest from his holdings, allocating so much here and so much there to various charities, so much to PBS, so much to Greenpeace, so much to Doctors Without Borders, so much for the kids. Nor did he put it into the ancient Chinese version of the bank for the future support of his family. No. He just rode out midstream and dumped it in the river. It seems unrestrained, without any subtlety, as does his activity here in the falling snow. Slap! Zenkaku won't have it. And he responds to that slap with, even a layman shouldn't be so crude. Again, we face two possibilities. Is he miffed, sulking, defensive? Rubbing his stinging cheek, did he think, a mere layman to strike a fully ordained monk? How disrespectful! In a monastery, the newest shaved-head monk would rank higher than the most seasoned layman. So his response could be an assertion of monastic proprieties. In a word, the layman's realization is crude, with a poor grasp of the necessary forms and courtesies. Or it could be a Dharma counter-challenge from a monk with open eyes, not easily shaken or cowed, standing on his own 2 feet. If so, his comeback sparkles with intelligence and insight. Old man, your answer is one-sided. How crude to make a show of emptiness. You are stuck in a snowdrift of one-sided realization. Form is only emptiness, emptiness only form. Your realization of this is clearly incomplete, and so is immature and crude. Even a layman should be able to go deeper. Take heed. Pong responds immediately again to this, even a layman shouldn't be so crude, but this time with cutting words. Though you call yourself a Zen student, old Yama, that is the Lord of the Dead, in other words, once you die, old Yama won't let go of you. Man, are you going to suffer after this life? You're still really hung up about yourself, aren't you? In short, he's saying you call yourself a Zen practitioner, yet there's still so much self-awareness and self-consciousness in you, you'll be a tasty morsel for the king of the underworld. Or he could be saying, you're stuck in a conventional blindness, lost in thoughts of monk and layman, appropriate and inappropriate. You're the one who should take heed. Who is it that when struck finds it crude? Your realization is worthless, your activity self-centered and defensive. The king of the dead is going to rake you over the coals at life's end. You're not yet intimate. Get to work while you still can. Or it could even be a Dharma counter challenge. The Lord of Death stands before you right now. Speak if you mean to live. How are you free? Demonstrate it clearly right now. The monk's answer can again be taken as presenting two distinct responses. He could be dithering, confirming his own personal stuckness. He's out of his depth, and he knows it, and so do we. Or he could again be presenting a genuine challenge of his own. What about you? From a literal perspective, it looks like a lame response. Defensive, uncreative, unoriginal, a repeat of his earlier self-conscious sulking. But he might be standing his ground and hurling a response right back at the layman. What about you? You think you're free? Show us. I'm not convinced. If so, he's as direct as the layman. They're two peas in a pod. Pong won't budge. He also stands his ground with slap again. You see, but you're blind. You speak, but you're mute. Has Pong now gone over the edge, beyond the pale? Slapping a monk was bad, but this, another crude, corroborating slap, plus on top of that, pointed personal criticism, this breaks all norms of courtesy, social or monastic. It casts it all aside. And it could be seen not only as unnecessarily forceful. Think of, what was that? Tangled Up in Blue, maybe, Bob Dylan saying, helped to get you out of a jam, but I used a little too much force. There's Pong. He used a little too much force. But it's also could be stereotypically Zen-y as well. Something that gives a kind of Zen lunacy a bad name. Then again, maybe there is some subtlety here after all. Is he saying, hey, you have everything you need to see and hear clearly, yet you're stuck in snowdrifts of thought, blinded by blizzards of assumption, convention, and habit? Or might he even be encouraging Zenkaku, saying not just simply that he's stuck, but by pointing out how vital it is that he get up out of that snowdrift he's stuck in and get going again? Or he might even be directly pointing to the vast ground of freedom, his, Zenkaku's, yours, mine, and simultaneously actually praising Zenkaku, this solidly forthcoming monk, for deep insight and profound Dharma functioning. You see, there's quite a range of possible responses in the Doksan room to this koan. Aiken Roshi used to say, or at least at one point told me, I don't know if he used to say it, there's a range of acceptable answers to a koan, and then again, there are some answers that are just plain wrong. So we have to sort this out. Roshi Kapleau used to say, the realized person has their yes and their no. The tall bamboo is fully tall. The short bamboo, completely short. What point would there be in imitation? When the snow is falling, literally or metaphorically, in our lives, where do we stand? And how do we express our practice realization as this very moment of life, just as it is. The tall bamboo tall, the short bamboo short. By attending to the practice, we can gradually and suddenly release our ancient habit of clinging to me in here, you out there, of me looking at snow, and snow as something falling, and find that not knowing is most intimate. Not that not knowing is ignorance, not at all. Rather, there is just, wow, beautiful snowflakes. They fall nowhere. This is the path of practice realization, attending to this breath, this count, this koan, giving ourselves fully to it, letting all else go. Mu breathes mu. No room is left over for old mental habits of chopping the world into self and other. The dualistic world falls away like an old cloak. For a brief eternity, we forget ourselves, forget the work of maintaining a fictive sense of ourselves, forget the old nest we keep returning to, and in that long-sought fulfillment of forgetting the self itself, there is just, for a moment, the count, the breath, the koan, the snow, freely falling. Beautiful snowflakes falling nowhere. To paraphrase Dogen's famous words, to study or practice the way is to study the self, explore the self, look into the self. And when we study the self, we find we forget the self. What self? And forget the other. To forget the self is to be realized by all things: snow, sun, rain, laughter, tears. Such selfless practice continues endlessly. In other words, it's not I've got it and I'm done. It's that practice realization continues selflessly, endlessly. The practice continues. Our practice is not to gain something new that we don't have, but rather to let go of what's so old it's no longer needed, to forget the endless repetitive loops of what is used up and habitual, and find anew the ancient and the timeless. Our self-forgotten realization of practice of realization continues freshly, which also means endlessly. The greatly creative, iconoclastic Zen master Ikkyu wrote, "When I tried to remember, I always forgot. Once I forgot, I never forget." Once I forgot myself completely, I never forget what I've been looking for all along. Here lies our freedom, eternal, joyous, selfless, pure. After years of practice, we may momentarily, truly forget ourselves, and with self forgotten, and other forgotten too, we no longer commit to the habit of trying to get back to wonderful past insights, fleeting selfless moments. Rather, we can more and more live from the non-dual, self-forgotten reality of right now. Our practice realization is intimate with self, other, raindrops, snowflakes, sunlight, clouds, angry faces, smiling faces. Practice is our own nature expressing itself, no longer a burden, a responsibility, or an add-on. It is practice that practices. Such relief. We set down the baggage we've been hauling around since who knows when. beautiful snowflakes. This is rather easy to talk about, but it is hard to do. Zen practice is hard because it is steep and takes ongoing, repetitive, often boring work, at times sheer drudgery. As lay people, we must additionally, on top of this upward effort, make the extra effort of carving out time from busy, demanding schedules and responsibilities to commit to it. No easy thing. It's like taming a wild ox despite having other chores. Taming a wild ox despite having other demanding chores. And yet doing it is the rewarding point. Layman Pong knows what he's about and is pressing not just the 10 monks accompanying him, but through Shuido and Wan Wu, creators of the Blue Cliff Record, putting it to all of us. Stop dreaming. Wake to the vivid universe beyond the veil of our own habitual self-centeredness. Now we see as if through a glass darkly. How about seeing face to face? Beautiful snowflakes, flakes glittering, strange, mysterious, falling so thickly I can't see a thing. I can't feel a thing. I can't hear a thing, touch a thing, speak a thing, know a thing. But lay practice isn't about ignoring. Pong lived at a time when lay practice was the exception. Monks were the model. For us, it need not mean tossing anything away. There's no point in imitating old Pong, except in the seriousness of our intent. Prajna wisdom is inherent in each of us, so deep and pure, it is not even attainable. How can you attain what you never lost? Dane and Henry Roshi used to say, how can you enter a room you never left? Shuido brings us into this subtle realm with this final comment. Hit him with a snowball as soon as he begins to speak. No eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind, all is white. So packed with snow that nothing can be differentiated, nothing separated or singled out. Rather than darkness, it's a total whiteout. This glittering silence, so vast and empty, is Pong's nature, Zenkaku's nature, and our own nature. Shuido returns us with smashing directness to the mysterious. Here's the truth, he says, right in your face. How can you miss it? Hit him with a snowball, and all is gone. It's just snow, through and through, 1,000 mountains covered in snow. Why is that one peak not white? So settle down, old Pong. Let the snow fall as it will. Stop trying so hard to outdo everyone. Enough words and drama. Be still now. In the midst of snowflakes endlessly falling, without ears or eyes, look and listen. You poor old dotard, even to say nowhere is already saying too much. To conclude, here are 2 American snow poems. While the practices of Zen Buddhism originated in Asia, starting with the Buddha's great personal effort in India 2,500 years ago, evolving its forms afterward through China, Korea, Japan, Vietnam, the realization of original mind that Zen helps us wake to has always been here, from the start, right where we are. The first poem is familiar, an American classic, atmospheric with Pong's snowy realm. But if you listen carefully, you'll find it also packs its own punch and challenge. Stopping by woods on a snowy evening, Robert Frost. Whose woods these are? I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near. Between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sound's the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark, and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. The second poem is perhaps less familiar. However, Roshi Capital used to end all his Tay shows on this koan with it. Wallace Stevens's The Snowman. Stevens, one of the 20th century's greatest poets, was also one of its most Zen-like. In fact, Aiken Roshi wrote a whole chapter in his book, Original Dwelling Place, on Wallace Stevens and Zen. Stevens was also a kind of Vimalakirti. Vice president of Hartford Life Insurance, it said at times he'd pause in his business work to dictate a poem to his secretary. Here's The Snowman. One must have a mind of winter to regard the frost and the boughs of the pine trees crusted with snow. And having been cold a long time, to behold the junipers shagged with ice, the spruces rough in the distant glitter of the January sun, and not to think of any misery in the sound of the wind, in the sound of a few leaves, which is the sound of the land, full of the same wind that is blowing in the same bare place for the listener who listens in the snow, and nothing himself beholds nothing that is not there, and the nothing that is. One must have a mind of winter to regard the frost and the boughs of the pine trees crusted with snow and have been cold a long time, to behold the junipers shagged with ice, the spruces rough in the distant glitter of the January sun, and not to think of any misery in the sound of the wind, in the sound of a few leaves, which is the sound of the land full of the same wind that is blowing in the same bare place for the listener who listens in the snow. And nothing himself beholds nothing that is not there, and the nothing that is. We'll stop here and recite our great vows for all.